Hey, this is Joe Gilder with Presonus. Today we're going to round out our series on my 5-step mixing process. Today we're going to talk about step 5. Now, admittedly, this is the dorkiest of the steps, but stick with me because it actually will help you finish your mixes, especially if that's something that you struggle with, knowing when your mix is finished. This step does involve a couple of rules. Now, when I hear the word rules, I want to get up out of this chair and run because we're creative people and we don't tend to like rules. False. We love rules. We actually love limitations. We actually cannot create without them. Let me give you an example. Let's say right now you're working on an album. You have already given yourself a crap load of limitations. You're working on an album. Songs will have start and stop times. There will be a limited number of songs. You are working on music as opposed to visual art or as opposed to creating food. So you're only appealing to the sense of hearing, not the sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of touch. You have limited your art to the sense of hearing. Not only that, you're making music as opposed to spoken word or interviews or things like that. Though all different types of art, you've limited your art to specifically music. So you're already well down the rabbit trail of rules and limitations for yourself. I want to impose a couple more to help you and I finish that art so that we can get it out there to the world. If you're not familiar, Seth Godin, great marketing mind, he says all the time, it's not art unless it's shipped. And what does he mean by shipped? He means if it's not out there. Art was meant to be created and then shared with someone else. You can't call it art if you can't call what you make art if I can't experience it. Now, you can disagree with the definition, but I like it because it means I can sit here in my studio and work on stuff all day, every day, for months and years at a time. But if no one else gets to hear it, then it's just it's something else. It's not art. Maybe it's a creative expression. Maybe it's just a fun playing. It's my version of playing video games, and that's all fine and well, but it's not art. It would be art if I then put it out there to the world and someone else can experience it and connect with me over it, or someone else can hate it, which is one of the big reasons why we never finish our art. Okay, enough about art. Here are the rules. Rule number 1, when you get to the point in your mix where you're starting to wonder, am I finished? Am I close to being finished? Once that thought crosses your mind, it's sounding pretty good. There's no big obvious issues, and you're starting to think, okay, this is the point in the mix where a lot of times I'll go down rabbit trails and end up making the mix worse instead of better, that over-mixing thing we've talked about. When you get to that point in your mix, it's time to do this step 5. And step 5 is an iterative process. You can do this step over and over and over and over again, essentially a rinse and repeat option until your mix is done. So what does it involve? The first thing it involves is stepping back and looking at the mix as a whole. So we're terribly guilty of zooming into this section of the song or this one track or this one plug-in on this one track. And those things are good and necessary. But when we're talking about is the mix finished or not, we need to zoom back out and think of the song as a whole. So rule number 1 is listen to the song from start to finish without stopping it. Without stopping it. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You decide you want to listen to the song. You get about 10 seconds in, you hear something you want to fix, and then you go mess with it. That's the exact thing I don't want you to do as a part of this process. This is an evaluation. You're going to listen to the song from start to finish. 3-5 minutes, however long the song is, without touching anything. So listen to the song without stopping it, and also listen to the song without touching anything in the mix. What's the reason behind that? The reason is, like I said before, it's really easy to say the song begins, vocal comes in, and you say, oh, that's too quiet, and you turn it up. Then the chorus gets there, and you say, oh, the vocal's too loud, turn it down. Well, guess what? You just turned it down in the chorus. Now it's turned down back in that verse again. You've undone the problem that you solved earlier. So a lot of times we're working against ourselves by this need to jump in and mess with stuff. And I do it all the time. It's not a bad thing. It's just you'll never finish a mix if you always stop 10 seconds in and adjust something. At some point, you've got to think bigger picture and think of the mix as a whole. Let's take that same scenario. I listen to the mix. I'm not allowed to touch anything. The only thing I'm allowed to touch is a piece of paper and a pencil or like a note document on my computer. And I just take notes of things that I hear that I want to change or at least look into. So instead of adjusting that vocal, I can listen and I've got my notepad up and I can say, verse 1, vocal too quiet, verse 1. And then when it gets to the chorus, I can make a note that says vocal level good in chorus 1. What does that tell me? That tells me that, yes, I need to turn the vocal up in verse 1, but I don't need to turn it up globally. I just need to go in and automate the volume of verse 1 up, but not mess with the volume of the chorus. Can you see how this starts to give you a bigger picture? Now you are making notes, kind of automation notes almost, but just bigger picture notes of, okay, this is a problem in this section. Now let's see if it's a problem in the entire song, or is it a problem just in this section? You know, the cymbals are too loud. Are they too loud overall? Or is it really just that one fill where the drummer went completely animal from the Muppets and hit them way too hard, and we can deal with that right there without affecting the rest of the mix? Those are the kind of things we're talking about. So the rule is sit down, listen to the song from start to finish, make a list of changes you want to make as you listen, and while you're listening, you're not allowed to touch anything. It sounds easy, but if you've never done this before, you're going to feel like a kid with ADD. You're not going to know what to do with yourself because you're going to want to jump in and adjust things, but that's the exact wrong thing to do in this instance. Now, when you get to the end of that process and you've got your list, guess what? You now have a to-do list. Now, there's another rule. You work through that to-do list and that to-do list only until you've knocked everything else off the list. Now, sometimes items on that list for me could include add more effects on the outro, ? And it's just because I thought it could maybe use a little more reverb there, but I'm not sure. And so that to do really means go listen to the outro again and make a decision about that. Then once I do that, I mark it off, I delete it off the notepad, whatever, then I go to something else on the list. This is really important, and this will keep you from over-mixing and spending gobs of time, 12 hours on a mix that you could have done in 4. You're going to just stick to the list. Once you do one, you go to the next, and trusting that you're going to deal with any more issues that arise. I'll tell you about that in a second, but you go through your list. Your list may have 100 things. It may have 50 things. Mine usually have at least the first pass, usually 10 to 12 things on there that I want to adjust. Usually smaller things, but things that I want to mess with. I don't care what order you go through the list. Just pick one that bothers you, the one you want to adjust. Spend the time you need to spend fixing that thing, then move on to the next one. Once you've completed the list, do the process again. We're basically at the stage in the mix where we don't want to just be all willy-nilly and free. We want to move with purpose. The previous sections of the mix, once we did between the static mix and where we are now, that's the time to jump around. Oh, I don't like those drums. Let's go mess with the drums. Oh, that bass is weird. Let's go mess with the bass. Oh, that vocal now sounds funny. Let's go mess with that. That's the fun, kind of exciting jumping from one thing to the next part of mixing. We're past that now. We're going through and listening, and we're making adjustments. Does it sound not as creative? It makes sense. There's an element of this that is more business. We need to finish this thing. We can't just continue adjusting for all eternity. We want to finish it because we want to get it out there. And this process will help you do that. So once you've cleared out that list, do the process over. Rinse and repeat. Sit down, put the mouse down, lock it in a safe if you need to, and then listen through the song in its entirety and make another list. Now, ideally, the way this works for me, I'll have a list that's maybe this long on the first pass. Then I'll fix those. Then I'll listen again, and other things will have come up, and the list will be this long. Then I'll do those. Then the list is this long. Then the list is this long. And then I listen through and say, hey, this is done. This is mix 1. This is my mix is done. And then I print it, send it to the client or whatever, and get feedback and do the revision thing. But it's essentially like making revision notes for yourself. One of the things I love about doing client work is once I do my best mix and I send it off and it's mix 1, and a part of our deal is I'll give them 2 revisions, so up to mix 3 for changes they want to make. When they come back with a list of changes, it's like 5 to 7 things. Hey, can the vocal go up here? Can we try a different effect on that there? Whatever that is. I love it because the email is a to-do list, and I just go through and say, that one, done. That one, done. It's the same process. Once that's done, I stop. And I may listen one more time and make sure there's no big issues that have come up since I did those fixes. But generally speaking, I'm working from a list, and it's a pretty efficient process. That's what I want us to do in this step 5. We've done the creative work. Now we're kind of getting back into more of a manager position. We're identifying problems, solving them, fixing them, and moving on. That's how you know when your mix is finished. So to recap, listen to the entire song start to finish without touching anything. Make a list of things that you don't like. Work off of that list until the list is gone, and then do the process again. You're not allowed to do anything outside of those things I just said. Try it on a mix. I promise you it'll work for you, and you'll find yourself mixing faster and getting better and identifying problems, and you won't be over mixing nearly as much. All right, thank you so much for watching this series. If you haven't seen the other videos in this series, there should be a link somewhere here down below. There's 5 steps to this process, and each of them has some unique little twist to them. So go through that process and then go apply it on a mix. Go pull up a song and mix it and use these steps. See if they work for you. They may not, but they just might. Thanks for watching. I'm Joe from Presonus. See you in the next one.